Hey everyone, Pastor David here, and so I've gathered with some people to talk about something important. And so last Sunday, June 7th, we began the process as a church of regathering, and it was certainly a first day and a first step of many, many steps. But a lot of people have been asking, so how did that go? And we thought it would be maybe wise for us to do it in this format here. So you all are kind of joining us in a Zoom meeting, except recorded. So we've got a couple of guests, actually members of Bear Creek, who are going to help answer the question of, okay, how did it go on Regathering Sunday? And so we have Dr. Tony Odusumu. I can never do it. I can't do it, Tony. Dr. Tony. Her name is Dr. Tony. And then also Suzanne Curran. She's with us. Both of them are in the medical community. We have turned to both of them already for consultation and advice about how to open. And so, but I want you guys to tell us just a little bit more about what you do in the medical community, and then we're going to sort of jump in. So Dr. Tony, tell us what you do.
I'm a family medicine practitioner. I've been practicing for about 9 years, and I've been attending Bear Creek for 9 years. I work for Memorial Hermann Medical Group.
Excellent. And so you are seeing some COVID-19 patients, I suppose.
Yes, we see patients, but we see them virtually whenever they screen with certain symptoms. And so, yeah, we are managing COVID-19 patients, but we are doing so safely in a virtual manner so that we don't affect patients in our clinic.
Yeah, absolutely. Suzanne, tell us about what you do in the medical community.
So I'm an RN and I work at Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office. I'm the Director of Nursing in the jail. So I have a population of, on a good day, 700, and on a bad day, 1,300 inmates that I take care of.
Oh, wow. And you and your staff are there to care for their medical needs.
Correct.
So, wow. And so you especially are working in an environment of enclosed spaces where lots of people are gathered. And so, yeah, absolutely. Well, then we also, of course, you see that we have Tim Hill with us, our executive pastor, and he is the minister of logistics most of the time. And so anyway, he's in this circle to just sort of answer the question. So Tim, we regathered for the first time in person, and tell us how that went.
Well, we had a great first Sunday back. Pastor David, has really done a great job of leading our staff to be very smart, very wise. We've leaned into these ladies here along with others, read all the guidelines. And so we had 4 services to start back up, starting with our chapel all the way with Spanish at the end. And so through those 4 services, we had over 600 people, just over 600 people come back on site. We're still maintaining a really strong online presence, and so we had total over 3,600 join us between online and at the church. And the experience for the folks at church was great. They were able to really enjoy the service, and I know the people online got to hear them clap. It was just such a joyful time to gather together. So it was a great Sunday all the way around.
Yeah, it was an incredible gathering, and we're just so blessed that we also saw 15 salvation responses from the morning. And as you know, the gospel is just at the core of who we are, and I'm just blown away to watch the Lord take adversity and just bend it and turn it and make it into advantage. Our reach with the gospel has just magnified by being online and broadcasting, and now to be both in person and online is, I think, is an incredible milestone. And so Sunday was the journey of the first step of 1,000 miles. And so Tim, tell me, just tell everybody kind of in a compact way what we did to regather safely.
So with all the research and the conversations with medical professionals like these two ladies, we developed a process. So when staff and volunteers arrive, we ask them to get there early. They go to an area where they're screened. We take their temperatures. We ask them some key questions about what they've done to watch themselves with this virus, any symptoms, anybody they've been around. So we do that before we introduce anybody into a serving environment. Then,
and you're saying that's staff and volunteers.
Staff and volunteers.
Staff and volunteers.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
So we do that to just make sure everybody that comes is well served and the people serving them are in a good place to be able to do that. And it's also an opportunity to just say thank you to those great volunteers that are helping us, that are coming back out. So it was great. They all get their assignments. They're encouraged to wear masks as people are coming in. We want them to feel safe, and so want them to know that it's a good place as they're walking in. We welcome them. We sanitize folks' hands, and we have sanitizer up and down the hallways. So outside of spraying somebody's hand with some sanitizer, at any point anybody can get to some hand sanitizer.
Yeah, and so clarify there, are you talking about just volunteers, or are you talking about as anyone enters? Anybody
coming in. So at our entrances, volunteers to spray the hands as well as in both hallways, and it's open, it's available for everybody to use that. So we know that keeping your hands clean is one of the most important things you can do to prevent the spread of the virus. So that's one thing that we really encourage. Then as people make their way through the facilities, we do everything we can to make it as hands-free as possible. So doors are propped open. As you enter the church, we have volunteers who open the door for you, so you don't have to touch anything. And so you get to say hi to people, but we don't shake hands. That's one of the hardest things, is not giving each other hugs or all of that. But boy, we smile at each other. You can see it in our eyes. In fact, our masks even say, "I'm smiling behind here." And we were, because it's so good to see folks. And so that's going on throughout the morning. As people make the way to their seats, they'll notice that we've adjusted our worship center and our seating around to ensure that people can be spread out in that space and follow that 6 feet of distance that they ask us to do around us. So everybody can do that. Families sit as groups together as we get ready to worship.
And one cool thing there, Tim, was that, not only, can people count chairs, 3 chairs is 6 feet. And so not only could we be 6 feet apart, horizontally, also our rows, we spread our rows to be 6 or 7 feet apart. Yeah. So in any direction in the worship center, you're no closer than 6 or 7 feet, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, one key thing, I mentioned the chapel service in the morning. We've really set that aside for our seniors, for our most at-risk population. That's one of the things we're encouraged to do, is make sure that that group of folks can come back and gather, but do it at a time and a place where they can be safe, where they're together as a group. So we had almost 50 of those folks joining us Sunday for chapel, and they came early and they left and weren't in the mix of all of the other, because it's in the gym. So they have their own entrance and exit. They have their own space to gather and worship. So just like we did, we spray hands, we've got masks. So we did everything we could to ensure that they can come and enjoy worshiping together during our chapel service. So that was a really great experience to see those folks back as well. When the service is over, people are able to exit in an organized way and in a way that's safe. And of course, once they leave the building, we all know that being outside is the safest place to be and interacting, because just in the fresh air and the sun, at that point, being able to interact even more with folks before we were leaving. The other reason that's really important for us is because as soon as people leave, we spray the worship center with a sanitizer, and to ensure that it helps to disinfect anything that's taken place, so that the environment is clean and ready for the next group of people to come in. And what we're doing there is a lot like what schools do during the flu season. where they spray those facilities. I'm sure, you know, you two ladies, those may be things that go in and out around hospitals and medical facilities of spraying. So we're doing the exact same thing. Those are things we just never did as a church before, but we're doing them now. So
Yeah.
those are all the things that we're doing to make sure it's a safe place for folks to come back to.
Yeah. So just in your interactions, Tim, from Sunday morning, I mean, what were you hearing as far as feedback of those who were there?
Yeah. Well, one is that everybody, no one that I knew of felt uncomfortable being back there. But I'll tell you the thing that I heard most of all, after missing each other's presence with one another for over 12 weeks, not realizing how good it was going to feel to be in the worship center together with our faith family. And so those that were able to come back on that first day, that's what I heard most of all, is just how good it felt to be together as a faith family. And we know that while we were together in person, we're also so thankful for all those people that joined us online too. That's still an amazing thing that our folks have done during this time.
Exactly right. And our broadcast, our online presence, that's going to be long term. And we're going to continue to grow that and grow its excellence and just continue to reach into people's homes and hearts through that means, especially for people who are in high risk situations, but then also just others as they're just processing their own families, needs about when is it right to be able, to regather for us. And so that's going to stay there, and that's going to stay really strong. I had the same experience, Tim. I was just amazing to be there with others. And you know what? I know this theoretically experienced it Sunday. Presence, just presence. That's not a sociological principle. That is spiritual community. It is as deep as who we are. It's a necessity in our lives. And so it was a huge joy to get to do that. Okay, now we're to the scary part of this gathering, and that is where we turn to Dr. Tony and Suzanne and just now say, so how do you think we did in terms of safe gathering?
So as someone who is opening a clinic and seeing patients under the umbrella of Moore Herman as an entity, we have lots of practices and that we've enacted because of COVID. So I think that what you've done really well is, look at all the different, and I was there when you had the meeting with the different personnel and different people with different backgrounds to figure out how to get the information in order to get the church together in a safe manner. So I think what you guys have done really great is educate the staff, make them wear masks, screen them before they enter. These are things that we're doing in our clinic also to make sure that patients are safe. The sanitizer use and making it very available everywhere, that's very good. And also minimizing touching is good because of course we don't want people, with all the things that you can do, you minimize the risk of infection and transmission, but it's never 100% preventable, even in a hospital, even in a clinical setting. So minimizing touching is good, and then reorganizing the seating is something we did in our clinic so that people aren't gathered all together and squished together. So all those things are very good things that you've done. I think even the act of making a video to educate people is also very important. That's definitely something that is helping. Even in our clinic, we're educating patients with every visit, even if they come in just for a refill of blood pressure medicine, we're still taking time to educate them about COVID-19 and the things that they can do personally in their home to make sure that they're safe. So just continue this path. You take the information as it comes because it's changing on a daily and a weekly basis.
Correct.
And then you make decisions based on that, and that is definitely being done. I see that the church is diligently working to make sure that the patrons are safe.
Yeah. Suzanne, what have you seen and heard in terms of Bear Creek? How do you think we're doing?
I think that we did an awesome job this past Sunday. It was fabulous to be back with our faith family again. I know myself and the kids really enjoyed being there and appreciated that the church was open again. I think I 100% agree with everything Dr. Tony has said. The only other thing that I would add is that our volunteers were more than willing to show up that little bit earlier so that we could do all those checks and get everybody in place. And I was working in the room with Candy McLaughlin, making sure that the temperatures were checked. And it was Candy and myself and my daughter. And we had a one-way system in there. So everybody came in one door and went out the other. And then they were into the main body of the church so that we had a very easy idea of who had been checked and who didn't. And that was a great idea on Candy's behalf, that we had that one-way system.
Excellent. Yeah. And again, on the temperature checks, the screening and the temperature checks, we're talking about that's for staff and our volunteers.
Yes.
That's not a protocol that we used this last Sunday for someone who's just coming in the North Tower or the South Tower. They could come in. But of course, we're seeking to do just as Dr. Tony said. We're seeking to say to people late in the week, as we're doing the Save Your Seat, hey, make sure that you're symptom-free and that you haven't been exposed in recent days to someone. If so, please join us online. And so we're trying to continue to reverberate with that, that message. Yeah, good. So I maybe should have asked these questions the other way. So maybe it's a backtrack, and that is, okay, you guys are in the knowledge loop every single day, and as Dr. Tony, you said, we're learning every day more and more. Our knowledge is getting more and more specific. This is like a big question. Does the medical community believe that churches can gather safely? Another way is, can we, in your medical opinion, maybe that's better, in your medical opinion, do you think a church can gather safely?
So, there's not a consensus in general, but because there are doctors that don't agree and there are doctors that do agree. But do we believe that there are things that you can put in place so that people in general can gather safely, and that would apply to a church? Then yes, we do. And those guidelines have been put forth by the CDC. And in the same way that we can safely gather in the clinic is the same way that you guys can safely gather in a church. And as long as those guidelines are in place, then those are the ways that we can gather and minimize the risk of transmission and help to ensure that people can be as safe as possible.
Excellent. Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. Suzanne, anything you would add there as a medical professional? Is your experience saying to you, yes, a church can gather safely? I know it's a relative term, or not?
No, I agree with what Dr. Tony's saying, that, everyone differs, but I in my heart believe absolutely we can. And I have had the privilege of sometimes daily, sometimes weekly Zoom calls with the Department of Health of the state of Texas and also with the CDC. And Bear Creek, I believe, was at the forefront of what they were doing and put in place, because we already had guidelines set for ourselves, and yet the Department of Health guidelines were not released until May 31st, and we already had those guidelines in place. So I think that for our church body to know that our pastors and our leaders in the church have absolutely listened to people like Dr. Tony and myself and other individuals in the church that have maybe had some insight information in what was going on almost, and that we were able to let you all have that and discuss that, and it was a very open discussion, and that you all took on board, and we are where we are today, probably a step ahead of maybe even where the guidelines had suggested that we should have done, because we already had everything in place.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's great to hear. But again, you know, it's not Tim's area of expertise nor mine. And so, you know, wisdom is this: go find the people who do know and ask them. And that's been you guys. So, you know, we're wanting to do our best to keep this conversation as compact so it's listenable, you know, for our people. But well, I want to ask. I want to ask about how important is the mask, and maybe if you could drill down a little bit. Just think of a person walking into the church. So they're walking in, they're in a hallway, then they're in a worship center, then there's a singing time, then there's a preaching time, and then they leave. So drill down a little bit. How important is the mask, and are there any moments that it could come off, or what's your medical opinion?
So the mask should stay on as much as possible, especially on an adult. The children, you know, that's a little tougher. But for an adult, it should stay on as much as possible. If you're singing in the choir, it can come off. If you're preaching on the pulpit, it can come off. But otherwise, they should really try to keep it on. In our clinic, there have been clinics that have had outbreaks, but in our clinic, we have a little over 12 staff, and we've been seeing patients in the clinic freely since May 18th. And we, to this date, have no cases. And we've even had doctors tested for antibodies and staff tested for antibodies and still have no cases. And, you know, I thank God for that. And I think Suzanne can speak to something even more impressive, that she works in a place that houses people under close quarters, over 700 people typically. So, and the fact that they either have had no cases or very minimal cases, once again, is a testament to the screening procedures, etc., but also the use of the mask. So it is very important to put the mask on. You don't only protect yourself, which is important, but you're protecting other people. Because you don't know sometimes when you already carry the virus, and have we had people in our clinic who've had the virus without knowing it initially? Yes, and yet still we have had no one test positive, and I think that's a testament to the safety of wearing the mask and limiting contact.
Wow, that's important. Suzanne, would you add to that?
I think that again, everything that Dr. Tony says that I agree with, and you don't have to have the fancy surgical masks or N95 masks. Some type of face covering, and the black ones that we have with I'm Smiling at Bear Creek are perfect. You know, we, like Dr. Tony says, in the jail we implemented very, very early on that robust screening process. And then we set our some of our inmates attached to make cloth masks, and all the inmates wear masks. So you don't see anyone walking around the jail without a mask on.
Wow.
It's keeping us all safe.
That's amazing. So let's summarize, and we'll probably say some of the same things we've already said, but just to reiterate what's important. So going forward, you medical professionals, Bear Creek going forward, what are the most important guidelines for us to follow going forward? And Suzanne, you get to go first this time. Okay.
I think doing what we're doing and being sure and steady with what we're doing. And I think that on our very first meeting with Pastor Tim, I used the phrase that we need to have faith over fear, that we got to believe doing the right thing, that our leaders, our pastors and our leaders are reaching out to those of us in the different professions and taking on that knowledge, and that we keep up with that really rigid hand sanitization, washing our hands, hand sanitizer, keeping our distance like we have in the worship center, and wearing face coverings as much as is possible.
Okay, all right. Dr. Tony, what would you say?
It's my turn to agree with Suzanne.
So the three we just said, screening, and then clean hands over and over and over, and the mask.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, Tim, is there anything else you would want to add to this conversation? I think we need to bring it kind of to a close, but man, this has been so reassuring to me to have these two professionals, these medical professionals, to say, yeah, this is where we think you are. But what about you? Anything else you'd want to add?
Yeah, the one thing I would add is I want to thank these two ladies, and there are others in the church, but I have leaned into them, and I've had them meet with our age group staff as well, as we give consideration to when we can take another step of adding some age group programming, expanding our volunteer base to help with that, because we're a church. But we couldn't be where we're at today if it weren't for these two ladies. They have been so helpful. So I want to say thank you to both of you. You guys both mean a lot just to my family personally. Suzanne and her daughter and my daughter are friends, and we got a great relationship there. And of course, Dr. Tony, she cares for my wife and my daughter just as a medical as their doctor. So they mean a lot to me. And then just the fact that they're a part of our faith family, but couldn't be where we're at today without you guys. So thank you. And I'd also would say to everybody who watches this video, the fact that we're doing all of this because we love everybody in our church and everybody in our community that would want to come to church. Pastor David, one thing I didn't share, Sunday we had first-time guests. We had first-time guests in our Spanish service. We had those in our English services. We had people come for the very first time. And we couldn't have done that in a way that's safe and that they would feel able to come to church without these ladies and without our volunteers. And so I just want to say thank you to all those who served Sunday, what you meant to being able to care for people in our church. So thank you. And Pastor David, thank you for how you just have encouraged us to, as a staff, to lead us, but to lead us in a way that there's no pressure to move faster than we should. That
Correct.
We've actually been on the lagging end of doing things compared to many churches around us, but it's because we wanted to make sure we did everything the right way and the best way possible. So
that's correct. Yeah. And so, we'd want to ask our church family to just really join us in praying about that next decision. And that next decision is when and how we can begin to expand our ministry to age groups and how to do that safely. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to consult the medical community about what is generally agreed about the most important or wisest things to do. So pray with us about that as well. And then, I would just want to say, Bear Creek family, you as an individual family, if you're ready to regather, we think we have a safe environment in which to do so, but we don't want anybody feeling that our church's leadership is pressuring or pushing, because we're not. We want to offer as accurate information as possible, then want you to pray and just say, is it time for us? Is it time for us to really begin to maybe step out and regather? And if not, that's what Bear Creek Online is all about. Man, keep joining us and stay faithful there and stay connected, and we'll remain family. Let me tell you, this is temporary. I don't know how long temporary, but it's temporary. And so we can walk through this, and God can really use us through it. And so I want to say, Dr. Tony, Suzanne, thank you so much for your help and for being with us tonight. And I'm sure we'll be calling on you in the days ahead.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Well, thanks very much. We're going to close right here. God bless you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.